This is the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. I am Lansing and Classic Rock 94.9 WMMQ East Lansing Town Square Media Stations. This is the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker 1240 WJIM Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ and special game day edition of The Game 7:30 a.m. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell, from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
Welcome in, Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, live from the Price Right RV Studio, and also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac, MSU Healthcare Sports Medicine, Dowding Industries, Schupan & Sons Recycling Industrial Services, Gravity Smokehouse, and MSU Federal Credit Union. I'm Beanie. You can hear me weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. My show's name is Offensive Minded on the Game 7:30 a.m. I'm joined by the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt. He's heard daily 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the Game 7:30 a.m., Staudt on Sports. And behind the glass, doing the Lord's work, keeping us on there and keeping you updated on traffic and weather, it's Brock Palmbush, also heard daily from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Staudt on Sports here on the Game 7:30 a.m. Fellas, how you doing today? And second straight noon kick, last game of the season at Spartan Stadium, Senior Day. General thoughts, and you want to set the scene a little?
When's the last time we had a home football game where snow was an issue? When's the last time that
Last
happened?
year against Penn State.
Oh, yeah,
right?
I forgot about
That's
that.
correct.
The Snow Globe game.
That's correct. And that was worse probably than what it's going to be today by far. And you had to have Hardy fans in Spartan Stadium for that one. You're going to need Hardy fans in Spartan Stadium today, but they are. That's why they call them Spartans, because they're hale and hardy.
I'll set the over-under at 30,000 butts in the seat.
I'll go over that.
You think so?
Yeah,
really?
I do too.
Yeah, I'll go over 30,000.
I agree.
By the end of the game, maybe not so much, but we were talking about this yesterday, and I got it to 45,000. But that's at wherever the height of the crowd's going to be, because it won't be at noon, because you were a student once, somewhat. So you know that you don't get to noon games at noon if you're a student.
I always got to noon games well ahead of time.
Well, you have responsibility.
That's right.
And
play that fight song.
I mean, and the band would be, practicing right now, correct?
Already done, right? Not quite done. Starts at 7 or 7:30 in the morning.
Something like that, because every time we did the tailgate show on campus, they were over there rehearsing,
yes.
And it didn't matter what the weather was.
Correct.
They were over there rehearsing.
And
in the good weather, there'd be several hundred people over there sitting in the grandstand watching them play and getting a free band show, pretty strong. But now, asking those kids to get up at dawn like they do, and 300 of them to be on time and go through all that, I'm amazed at the discipline they do that, especially with everything else they've got going on during the week with class. Good for you. I assume that you didn't violate.
I was never late.
If you were late for a band practice, is the punishment somewhat similar to being late for a football practice?
Well, that varies by team and by coach, so I would guess it varies by band, but I never did it. I was never late, so I guess I don't really know, and I don't think it was ever really delineated. But here's the thing. The culture of the Spartan Marching Band is one of such, storied history, and I'm not even kidding. The tradition is so strong, you don't have to worry about it. People take it so seriously that it wasn't an issue.
That's why the band has the reputation it has.
Right.
But I would think whenever you're dealing with 330, 40, whatever the number is, there's always one straggler or something like that. I mean, even the football team has a third of that.
It has to happen. I can't remember it happening, but that doesn't mean it didn't. I don't remember someone ever having to, miss
I mean, would the
game
band be out Friday night of home games partying and carousing, or did they say, no, I got to get up early tomorrow, I'm not doing that?
So it's not like there's any specific rule or curfew. If you're caught doing something, you're in trouble, but it's more like you owe it to the person next to you.
And what instrument did you play?
Trombone.
Do you still play it today?
Loosely.
You ought to bring that in here and serenade us.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's funny you bring that up, Tim, because at some point during this program, this is becoming a tradition here on the Tailgate Show.
Unlike any other.
Not quite like that. Not quite like Augusta, Georgia. But Tim, since you were born in Bloomington, Indiana, and about 4 or 5 years ago, for the first time, you actually sang the Indiana fight song.
Well, I'd had 2 tailgate warm-up shots, and the Indiana fans that were here were running their mouth by us. And I was in a good mood. Perlis was there. And Perlis, he was easily impressed. You could impress him. And George said, I don't know. So I'm giving him back. And I don't know. I don't remember how it completely started. I said, I bet I know more about Bloomington than you guys do. Just being, just giving him some cheap shot. Yeah. One thing led to another, and the one guy bet me. I told him, I said, "I'll bet. Do you know your own fight song?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'll bet I know it, and you don't." And he said, "I'll bet you $5 you don't." Well, those were fighting words, and I may have even missed one lyric word, but it was impressive, and the guy paid me the $5. He said, he had a great line, though. He says, "Our team is so bad, that's the only time I'll hear the fight song today."
Well, I'll bring my trombone in sometime, and I'll play it underneath.
But, when I was a kid, frankly, when there were only 10 schools, I basically knew the words to all 10 fight songs when there were 10 schools, because they're all good.
Now, why is that? Because you're into that stuff, right?
I'm into all that.
You like the pageantry of college football. Who doesn't?
The pageantry of Duffy used to say the one thing that college football has that pros will never replicate are the bands. And he's right.
Yeah.
Because
there are 2 NFL marching bands, they're brutal. Baltimore and Washington.
Do they have marching bands?
Yes, and they're awful.
Well, the college band, Stanford was a joke at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
That was a joke.
Yes, that's the thing, though.
But I always go by the Big Ten with 10. I mean, to me, the original 10 Big Ten football schools all have 10 great songs, and they.
So you're saying Michigan State doesn't?
No, the 10. Michigan State's one of the 10.
Not the original 10.
Well,
we replaced Chicago, right?
The 10 in my lifetime.
You get 10 in your youth.
But all of them, and all those bands seem to be pretty good, too. I used to fight with John Madden a bit. There were a couple of bands that he didn't. He never liked Notre Dame's band.
I can explain why. And I know it's going to hurt your feelings.
He likes the guy, Ken Dye, who's still there as the director of the Notre Dame band. But he gave me this long, endless song, and I said, John, I only go by the Notre Dame Victory March. That's all I got to play.
But that's not the band. That's like the history of that's the nostalgia factor and, the lore of Notre Dame. What he's getting at is Notre Dame's band every year. The point is, let's get as many kids as we can to come out for the band. Yeah, and they all get on the field. At Michigan State, there's a set number.
Yeah,
and you have to audition to get in, and then once half the people who audition get in, and half get turned down.
They get cut. Okay.
Now, then once you're in, you have to audition for a spot. You have to win a starting spot, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Every year that happens.
If you go to YouTube and put up and ask Notre Dame Marching Band, it's amazing where it has performed. It's performed in Dublin, Ireland. It's performed all over the world. It's performed at Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It's all those bowl games. It's been everywhere. And if you look at the YouTube of that band in Dublin, Ireland, before one of the Notre Dame games in August, it takes forever to get all those band members through those narrow streets parading, playing the Notre Dame Victory March. So, yes, that bothered him that there are so many. But Purdue's band has 500, if you include everybody from the big drum.
So some schools just put everyone in. And those are usually the bands that aren't very good, because there's not a standard or threshold for admission.
Well, where he and I argue was, I said, to me it's the music, not necessarily the cadence and all that. Well, John's a lot more sophisticated than that. I don't know whether David Thornton, the current band director, who's very good, by the way, is exactly the same. John was a mentor to him, as you know. Mm-hmm. But I think that what those kids have to do is very underrated. Very underrated. There's a lot of work that like today. There's going to be a halftime show. And, and this year, because of the financial issues that some of these schools have, Ohio State didn't even go on a road for this game, although they were at Penn State.
I heard that, yeah. But, I guess that's a long trip, too, though, isn't it? Columbus to the mountains of Pennsylvania?
I mean, they get in however many buses it took to get them over there.
For us, when I was in the band, it took 8 buses. 8 Dean Trailways buses.
Oh, really? Wow.
No, it's not cheap.
Mm-mm.
It's not cheap even if you don't stay overnight. It's not cheap.
Right.
But I always felt, and of course, Brock's heard me gripe about this forever, and I've told Madden this. I said if I ran the Big Ten, which I don't, the bands would perform far more at these games than what they do, especially if you are on the road. Because the road bands in the Big Ten, they give them no time. The pre-game's like 2 to 3 minutes.
Right.
Well, why did you even bring them over here?
I think it's like 6 minutes. Well, it was when I was in school.
I mean, when Notre Dame was here, they couldn't even play their full victory march. But the one exception they make, which, of course, is what they do in football and everything else, is Ohio State, because they let them come play Script, Ohio on the road. Well, that takes 6 minutes right there alone. Yeah. But it's worth it to see it, in my opinion.
But cool. Here's some inside baseball for you. When Ohio State is on the road, you'll notice they do a different version of Script, Ohio.
Yes, they do.
For time's sake.
Yeah.
And they spell it like 4 different ways on the field. Yeah. That's to make it go faster. And also impressive. Then everyone in every corner of the stadium gets to see it.
What did you think of the Michigan marching band?
Well, their musicianship is good, but not so great in technicality. That's something Madden would probably agree with me on. And then this is like one of the all-time, like, most band hardcore types would agree with me on this. You know how in football, if a quarterback wears gloves, they're considered less of a man, right? You know what I mean? If a quarterback wears gloves in cold weather.
I never thought about that, but
it's a thing.
But I'll go along with you.
It's a thing.
All
like
right.
They think less of you. You're not as hardcore, or you're not as serious. The marching band equivalent is using sheet music on the field, and Michigan always does. Unconscionable. How do you not have your own damn fight song memorized by now? Like that's ridiculous to me.
Did you play at the Rose Bowl?
Tim, I graduated in 2010. I was in your backyard from 2006 to 2009.
So to answer that question, no.
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't go
I'm only 4 years. Well, did you go to any bowl games?
Yes, my last 3 years. So I went to the Champ Sports Bowl, D'Antonio's first year. I was in Orlando.
Well, that was good.
When they lost to
Matt Ryan and Boston College.
Yeah, and Jeff Jagosinski got himself fired because Boston College told him, don't interview for an NFL job.
So how many
fired.
nights were you down there?
4.
So they gave you 4 nights.
Yes.
Well, that's pretty good.
My second year, we were in Orlando again for Capital One Bowl, which is just a Citrus Bowl, and we lost to Matt Stafford in Georgia, right?
Yep.
And then my senior year was Alamo Bowl against Texas Tech.
Which is better, San Antonio? It's got to be Orlando.
I love Florida, so I'm biased, but I'll tell you what, dude, San Antonio is fun. That's a kick-ass town. Just don't fall in the river.
Well, you have to have good weather.
Oh, yeah,
though.
the Riverwalk, yeah.
You got to have good weather, though.
My favorite story from San Antonio, 2009. So if you're of age, of course, you can go out and do things on your own time at night. There is a certain amount of time. There's just a certain curfew, and there's an expectation, hey, you've got a job here to do, and also you're representing the university. So every night, the elder ones who were of age, we would go out to the bars, nothing crazy, but, we were 21. What are you going to do? You're on a trip around New Year's Eve. So we found a place called, I think it was called La Iguana. We found it on our first night there. We loved it. Awesome margaritas. We come back the second night, and we ordered the same thing, this like huge shareable vat of margarita. And they're like, oh, sorry, that's not available tonight. And we're like, what happened? It was great last night. And they said, Michigan State got here and ran us out of tequila.
Good for them.
I was like, well, that tracks.
Yeah.
Did you play in the
Spartans will.
Did you play in the basketball band?
Yes, Spartan Brass, which is basketball, men's and women's, and hockey.
Did you get to the Final Four?
I went to 2 Final Fours.
Did you go to San Antonio?
No. The Final Fours I went to were Detroit and Indianapolis, 9 and 10.
Because Madden's best story of his 28 years at Michigan State, making it short, Brock's heard this, they're at the Final Four in San Antonio, and part of all of the festivities is that the 4 bands of the 4 schools in the Final Four put on a show on boats on the Riverwalk.
Yes.
So they're going down a Riverwalk, and there's thousands and thousands of people, and these 4 guys who were drunk show up, and they got Notre Dame shirts on, but Notre Dame is not in it, but they're there. Mm-hmm. So the boats are backed up waiting at one point, and the guy leans over to Madden from Notre Dame, says, says, I'll give you $500 to play the Notre Dame Victory March. And Madden says, are you serious? He says, yeah, I'm serious. The guy pulls out five $100 bills. So Madden tells it to the guy, there's, 35 to 50 people in the band for basketball. And they're all in the same
for tournament trips.
Yeah, for tournament trips. So he tells the band, he says, okay, guys, now remember we played this earlier when Notre Dame was in town, so we're going to play the Notre Dame. So they play it. And Madden says, here, take your lousy $500 back. We're not going to charge you to play your fight song because you're never going to hear it down here in basketball again. It's a good story, and it got a million laughs, and they did play it, and those guys were incredibly impressed. He said they were incredibly impressed because they heard their own fight song, and it didn't cost them a dime. But he said the guy pulls out five $100 bill. But, when you're on those trips, man, money's no object.
You get per diem from the school. Seriously. The athletic department does. And you know why they were impressed, those Notre Dame fans? Because Michigan State's band, even on a whim, without rehearsal, and just playing it from memory, is probably better playing the Victory March than Notre Dame's actual full-time band.
Could be, yeah. I mean, it's...
That's my professional opinion.
Yeah.
But just so you know, Tim, you are the stuff of legend in the Spartan Marching Band. People talk about your backyard like the Super Bowl.
Well, we've had 18 of them, and they've all been fun.
I was at 4. I was at 4 of them.
I think...
Will I ever get invited inside your house?
Anytime you want. Anytime you want.
Whoa.
And
I've officially made it.
I've been inside his house one time.
We've enjoyed 18 of those. I mean, they've raised $1.5 million from the band.
That's awesome.
From a band alone, it raised $1.5 million. That's a pretty good show.
And then all the help for the kids and everything. That's pretty awesome.
All right.
Also, there's the Tim Staudt version of the MSU fight song, a fan favorite, which, by the way, I kind of agree with you on. There's no singing. It's just all playing.
And he thinks I'm being funny on that because that's the word I heard when I grew up.
I understand.
Purdue screwed up the same thing. They have vocal in that, too. I've had that argument
That's part of the band history, though, everywhere. Well, this is a football tailgate show.
We'll get to it eventually.
Let's talk about sports.
The band's part. That's why
true. Pageantry.
The band and tailgate. Those people on one field love to go over there and hear the band.
Absolutely.
That's why they go over there early.
Absolutely.
They get another band show.
You're right. And we're back in a couple. Whitelaw PLC Tailgate Show.
Another travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Next, the Mel Tucker Show is back for another season on Lansing's Big Talker 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Get up close and personal with the head coach of Michigan State football every Thursday night. Be there in person or just call in and ask the questions you want answered. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. Brought to you by Ameriprise Financial, Dark Bank, Doubting Industries Incorporated, Chupin & Sons Incorporated, Blue Moon Belgian White. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
Trucks are out salting the highways and the main roads right now. Traffic not too bad right now. There was a crash on 96 eastbound right around Portland for people coming in from the west side of the state, but that has been cleared up. There's still that construction, 496 both directions between Martin Luther King Boulevard and now Cedar Street, although that's getting closer to being finished. And also Grand River Avenue at Okemos Road, that's still completely closed for another week or two. Take the posted detour in the area. As far as weather goes, there is a winter weather advisory until tomorrow morning. Just some snow showers, only about inch, maybe 2 inches of accumulation, so not very much. Patchy blowing snow, so be careful when driving out there. Right now, it's 21 degrees, mostly cloudy and a bit hazy out there. Your travel update is brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
This is the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
Welcome back. Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show, 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, coming to you live from the Price Right RV studio, and also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Dart Bank Mortgage, Joe Sambear, Ameriprise Financial, Craig Stiles, DBI We Do Office, High Caliber Karting and Entertainment, The Student Bookstore, The Nut House, and Gazelle Wealth Management. All right, boys, so the 69th all-time meeting between Michigan State and Indiana in football is coming up here at noon, dating back to 1922. All-time series for those interested. MSU leads 49-17 with 2 ties. State won last year 20-15. State has owned this thing, obviously, 15-4 versus IU since 2000. I looked it up. Indiana has only won in East Lansing 6 times. MSU is 27-6-1 at Spartan Stadium against the Hoosiers all time. So Indiana, by the way, has a chance to win consecutive games in this rivalry for the first time since 69. They won 67, 68, and 69. And Tim, explain this. All 3 of those games were in Spartan Stadium. Do you know why?
I don't. I remember the games, though, because Johnny Pomp was the coach at Indiana and got him to the Rose Bowl in 68. And the way he would coach, he would kneel down on the sideline with a cup of coffee and a styrofoam cup just like this the whole game. He always had a cup of coffee. And Butch Gonzo, John Eisenbarger, those were the 2 stars on that Indiana team that won late here. Duffy's team wasn't very good in those days, but that one game, Indiana had to have it and barely got it, but got it to go to the Rose Bowl. I went to the Rose Bowl. I won a trip that year to the Rose Bowl.
You won a trip?
I won a trip.
As like a fan?
I was a student.
Oh, okay.
And the State News had a national contest. Tell Brock to go ahead and go jump in a lake. They had to pick 32 national games in a national contest. And the girl I was dating, I was sitting in my dormitory, and we were just getting ready to leave for the holiday. And she said, here, fill this out. It was in the State News. It was a national contest, and they were carrying it. You had to pick 32 games. I got every one of them right. I didn't even know I did that either.
This is before the Dean curse went into effect.
Apparently.
True story. And this was a 67 season for the 68 Rose Bowl. And after the Sunday, I didn't even think about it. The Sunday afterward, I get a call from someone that says, you're the winner. You get 2, 4 nights, everything, blah, 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 the whole deal. And I didn't. She was in California. She lived there. And she said, come out and see me for the Rose Bowl. Just small talk. So I win the thing. It took my brother. We were out there, and we stayed at the Ambassador Hotel where 5 months later Robert Kennedy was shot and killed. And we were in the Ambassador Ballroom on New Year's Eve for the best true story. And then it's the Rose Bowl. Indiana lost to Southern Cal and O.J. Simpson 14-3. I almost forgot that till you brought that thing. That was a classic. I'm a student. I'm a sophomore. I filled that thing out. But that's an Indiana memory. I was at their last Rose Bowl.
It sounds like the opening scene of your biopic film. Have you sold those rights yet? Who would play Tim Staudt, Brock? Tom Hanks. He plays everyone.
You know what? And so
Tom Hanks could do it.
And it was an insurance company and they had a lot of different other contests. So there were like 20 of us that went to this thing. But I was the only one that won the football thing. But they took us all to the Rose Parade. It was a big deal. I took my brother and I went to that. They were out there for 4 days. It was what's to come? The whole thing. We stayed at the Ambassador Hotel.
Was Indiana? I'm being serious here now. I'll stop making jokes.
To your original question, I don't know why 3 straight games were in Spartan Stadium.
But Indiana was good at football back then.
Yeah.
For basically 1 year and average for 2.
Okay.
And then they really weren't any good until Bill Mallory got there.
Well, the
80s,
irony of that school has been that in every sport, even the women too, they're relatively competitive in everything, but football is their challenge. It's just been a tremendous, it's not necessarily a high school football state, and you got Purdue and Notre Dame there besides the MAC, all right? And it's just been so difficult for them. I mean, the upgrade a year and a half ago when the missus and we were on spring break, and I said, let's drive back up through Bloomington because I haven't been there since I'd done Big Ten basketball games there. I was stunned at how that campus has changed and the incredible upgrades Indiana has made in its facilities, from track to baseball to softball to swimming to the basketball and the football stadium. I mean, and they're never going to have a demand for – the only time they get a demand for seats is when the opposing team's Ohio State or Michigan. then they sell it to the visitors because they just have not been able to get a consistent traction. That's why it was bizarre to me 2 years ago in the COVID year with no fans in the stands. Mel Tucker's first year, Indiana comes in here and wins 24-0 and fully dominated the game. Fully dominated. Randall L. Antoine
Randall L.
He won big in here.
Yes, 2001.
Was that Bobby Williams' year? He had Antoine Randall L. came in here and they buried State.
Yeah, I remember that.
I mean, you can almost remember the 6 wins that they have had here over the course of time. And they're an underdog today.
But probably the most memorable game between these two teams was 1987 because it was the game that Michigan State won 27-3. Lorenzo White ran for almost 300 yards on 56 carries.
Right.
And
clinched the Rose Bowl. Bill Mallory comes to the locker room to tell the Spartans, go kick their ass. And
great video.
Yeah. And I don't think George Perlis ever got over the fact that Indiana fired Mallory because he was a close friend. And, like he says, look what Indiana has done in football since they got rid of Bill Mallory. Now, I don't think he was going to go much further anyway because he was near retirement age. But he got Indiana from brutal to average. And look, Michigan State was supposed to beat Indiana that day. You know, the irony of that game that nobody ever talks about, that there was a tremendous distraction that day because there were enormous numbers of celebrity football people in town because that was a late afternoon game. And the morning of that game was the Duffy Daugherty Memorial Funeral Service at St. John's Student Center in the middle of downtown East Lansing, which was packed with every football, and all the Michigan State coaches were there, and all the Indiana coaches were there, and it was well done. I mean, it was an emotional service, and it was at 9 or 10 o'clock Saturday morning, and then after that was the game that afternoon. It took a lot out of George, but I remember George was emotional after that. One reason they were going to the Rose Bowl, but he kept making reference to Duffy and Father Mac because George was close to both of them.
Sure. That's
so
good.
Now who knows what the storyline will be today?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to dig into that a little more. And this is good. I like you when you walk down memory lane, Tim, because that's good stuff.
It's what I can remember.
Well, that's good stuff. So I'm bringing all this up, the history of MSU and Indiana, and then let's talk about this, and then we'll get into it. Obviously, everyone knows it's the Old Brass Spittoon. But what's the history of that? So it started in 1950 when an MSU student named Gene McDermott, who was the junior class president at the time, I guess Michigan State had just won a big football game against someone else. I don't remember. It wasn't Michigan. It was Notre Dame. So in 1950, State had just beaten Notre Dame 33-30. You might remember this, Tim. And so Gene McDermott, junior class president at MSU, was afraid that there was going to be a natural trap game or letdown element to when State came home to play Indiana because Indiana wasn't very good and State had just had the big emotional win over Notre Dame, who's obviously a very big deal. And he thought, we need something to jazz up our series with Indiana so that we don't fall asleep and get taken advantage of and blow this game because they were undefeated at the time. So he decided to get a rivalry game trophy for the game. So he went to an antique shop in Lansing, and he found a literal Old Brass Spittoon.
Which I believe is legend has it, it's about 200 years old, and it was originally found at a trading post right where Frandor is today.
In modern-day East Lansing.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah, and so the antiques dealer told him, yep, this dates back to the 1800s. Fur traders were using this. And
basically 200 years old.
Yep. And the reason he purchased it was allegedly it had been used by a lot of, obviously, Michiganders, but also Indiana fur traders and people like that came up here to do business in the 1800s. So he buys it for $25, which I'm guessing is a lot more than $25 is now, right? And carves his initials into it, and then goes and just presents it to Michigan State. And I guess Michigan State was all about it, and he presented it to Indiana at that game, and they didn't care. He said it was like you could hear a pin drop. They weren't interested. But here it is, 72 years later, they're still handing that thing out every year. And so all that considered, is that, Tim, you tell me, you've been around the longest, is that why this is a quote-unquote rivalry game? Because let's be real, this isn't really a rivalry.
No, I don't think so. And I don't think the spittoon is paraded around the field after the game, is it?
No.
I don't remember that.
I've never seen
Indiana doesn't when it wins.
Actually, I take that back. My sophomore year, D'Antonio's first year, 2007, they played Indiana here at night. That was the first night game of the D'Antonio era, and it was a big hyped game because I think Indiana was like 5-1 or something. They beat them.
Indiana had won for the previous year in John L. Smith's last game.
Right.
Blew them out.
Yeah, they got the trophy that game and did celebrate with it. But that was a special circumstance, I think. It was like exorcising a demon, right? You're right, though. It's not a normal thing.
No, but nonetheless, it's, it's hype to get interest in the game because Indiana and Michigan State essentially play every year because they're in the same division. Now, whether that continues or not, and that's another subject that could come up today because in previous tailgate shows we've talked about, how's the Big Ten going to change when they get the two schools? Well, now UCLA is 50-50 to end up in the Big Ten because December 14th is the big California meeting of the legislature to decide, do we prohibit UCLA from joining the Big Ten? Film at 11.
I'm not an expert, but I would go ahead and guess that they're not going to hold it up because there's too much moneyed interest at stake.
I'm going to go the other way.
You think they're going to hold it up?
No, I think they're going to prohibit them from leaving the Pac-12.
But I just don't because of the money involved.
I don't think so. Their government thinks that that's completely blown out of proportion, and the surveys they've done with their students, their faculty, alumni, and donors, they get no support for them having. Look, that could go either way, right? But if you're going to take it further than what it's gone now, that's because you want to change something, not continue with the direction that we're going.
I don't buy it because I don't think they're going to do it because UCLA is so far in debt in terms of $100+ million.
They think they're going to go further into debt. They think now the argument from UCLA is we'll have to drop sports, and the California legislature says anything you do there, they don't want those kids traveling all over America.
I wonder. Well, that's what they say, but it's really about something else. I wonder if what's going to happen is this is all about what's going to happen to Cal. Maybe they attach Cal to the deal. That's if Cal comes too, then all of a sudden they're all on board. We'll talk about that next. Why don't we do that? Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show back in a couple.
Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM Lansing, and Classic Rock 94.9 WMMQ East Lansing, Town Square Media Stations. Back with more of the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on 1240 WJIM and 94.9 MMQ in less than 60 seconds. The Michigan State Spartan hockey team is back for another season on 1240 WJIM. Never miss a game again, whether you're on the go or just like doing it the old-fashioned way and sitting around the radio. Every face-off and every playoff can be heard on Lansing's exclusive home for Michigan State Spartan hockey. 1240 WJIM, Lansing's only home for hockey. Avoid the interruptions from the games and listen longer in the free 1240 WJIM app. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
Traffic looking up pretty good on the highways right now. 496 going westbound between Martin Luther King Boulevard and Waverly Road. That's a little bit slower than normal right now. Otherwise, it's pretty much free and clear right now. You do have to watch for trucks out on the highways and the main roads as they are applying salt to the roads right now. So be careful if you're driving around them this morning. Otherwise, pretty much free and clear. There is a winter weather advisory in effect until tomorrow morning. Blowing snow, not much accumulation, 1 to 2 inches, patchy blowing snow throughout the day. It could affect the game. We'll see. High temperature right around 25 degrees. It's 21 degrees right now in East Lansing. A travel update brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
This This is the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Today's broadcast is brought to you by White Law PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian Wine. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
Welcome back, White Law PLLC Tailgate Show, 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. We're coming to you live from the Price Right RV Studio, and we're also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac, MSU Healthcare Sports Medicine, Dowding Industries, Schupan & Sons Recycling Industrial Services, Gravity Smokehouse, and MSU Federal Credit Union. All right, let's put a bow on this. We were talking about the Old Brass Spittoon. Tim, explain this to me, since you can go back to when this all happened. So the Old Brass Spittoon starts in 1950, and this is now designated as a rivalry game to the point where it's been a protected opponent for Michigan State in scheduling for football, and that's something we've talked about going forward when the Big Ten changes here. Well, teams are going to have protected opponents. Obviously, State's probably going to have Michigan as one, but Indiana has been bandied about as another one. Why is this a rivalry? It has to be the trophy, right? And the thing is, it didn't have this history before that Old Brass Spittoon, which started in 1950, because at that time they had only played 4-5 times before.
Who calls it a rivalry, though? I never see that in the media. I mean, I never see that.
Right.
This game's at noon because, with all due respect, it's kind of an afterthought game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the big games today, frankly, are the big three. Ohio State's at Maryland, Penn State's at Rutgers, and Illinois at Michigan. And those games are what, the 3:30 game? Brock is Maryland.
No, Michigan's noon.
Michigan's noon. The other two are 3:30,
yes.
Right? But the reason Michigan's is noon is because, that's an ABC game, though.
Yes,
yeah,
it's
that's
not
an
the
ABC.
Fox.
It's not a Fox.
Fox is TCU at
Baylor.
Baylor.
It's
Right.
not the Big Ten Network. I mean, this is the chump change.
Sure, but
it is
considered a rivalry, not just by narrative purposes. The Big Ten has protected the series and embraces all that.
But it hasn't had to do that with the divisions because you have to play every school in your own division.
Yeah,
and
that's
Indiana
true.
and Michigan
That's true.
State are in the same division. There's nothing to protect. What I think will be interesting moving forward, I just think there are so many uncertainties in college sports in general, let alone in big-time football. We had the
Sure.
Peach Bowl CEO.
Gary Stokan.
We had him, when was that, yesterday, Brock? No, it was Thursday. He's on Thursday. He was begging. He was on last year because Michigan State was in the Peach Bowl. So
Right.
he's on this year because he thinks Michigan's got a shot because they're a semifinal game. And he's going. So the conversation is about the 12-team playoff. And he goes through 82 different scenarios that have got to happen yet before all of this is going to be figured out and put in stone prior to 2026 or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is in 2024, 25, or whenever, how is it going to look? And it's clear that this is a long way from completion, which would include how the Big Ten scheduled. I never remember in my lifetime where Big Ten football schedules were not completed as they are now. They just put the conference schedule out for next year a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
It used to be that was in stone 7, 8, 9 years in advance.
Well, it was, and then they pulled it down in July. It was on, they were available, that next year's conference slate was available, and then they took them all down and said we're pausing and reworking it. So let me ask you this. Since we can all agree it's not really a rivalry, even though it's branded and marketed that way, what constitutes a rivalry game? In just whatever comes to mind.
Well, I think at number one, it has to have tradition.
So
it's
history.
got to go back a long way.
How long is a
Harvard,
long
Yale.
way? Are you talking meetings or years or both?
Maybe both.
Well, this has that. 1922, and this will be the 69th meeting.
I mean, why is Harvard-Yale a rivalry, but Cornell-Princeton is not?
I don't know. Maybe it is. Is it?
I mean,
who's Cornell's rival? Brown?
No, I mean, the rivalry in the Ivy League is Harvard-Yale.
Right.
In everything. Academics, sports,
Yeah.
certainly football, okay? Alabama-Auburn's considered a rivalry.
Geography.
Yeah. Well, I think geography is certainly one. I mean,
Hate.
I think a protected whether that is ever going to happen in 2 or 3 years down the road with a revised college football look, to me, is impossible to tell.
So I think
right now, Oklahoma plays Oklahoma State
That's
football.
gone. This will be one of the last Bedlam games today, by the way.
Is Texas going to keep playing Texas A&M or Texas?
They will. They're in the same conference again.
But when they divide all that up,
I see.
Is that
Divisions.
all still going to be? Is UCLA and Southern Cal always going to be something like it is today? They play today, all right?
And they play for the victory ball.
And I think that's a big – that survey you talked about with UCLA, they surveyed current UCLA and former UCLA athletes. 93% said it's important that they're in the same conference as USC.
I mean,
that's a rivalry aspect, too.
Does Navy want to continue getting its brains beat in every single year by Notre Dame, including in Dublin next August? Because they play next August.
Yes, because it's good for them. That's a marketing thing.
And they only lost by 7 points.
It's a platform.
Well, and Navy never thinks in terms of we're going to win the national championship.
Right.
But that's a marquee game for them because it gives them a crowd, which it did in Baltimore last week.
It's got to be their biggest recruiting mechanism, playing Notre Dame.
Yeah, I would think so. And is Notre Dame going to continue with a rivalry with Southern Cal? I mean, one would think so, but who knows? I mean, I think predicting exactly how college football and college sports, no matter what anyone says, as early as even next year is very difficult to do.
I agree. So, what constitutes a rivalry? We've discussed tradition and history in terms of how far back it goes and how many times they've played. Geography usually has something to do with it.
Yep.
What else?
Hate.
Well,
right.
Some hate.
Geography tends to breed that for some reason, doesn't it? In sports, you're close to me, so I hate you.
You versus Brock, that's a rivalry.
Is that it? Is that all it is? I feel like a lot of times with these rivalries that aren't those natural things, right? So when a rivalry doesn't have the location aspect or the history aspect of a lot of these rivalries are rivalries just because it's all it's ever been. That's all anyone ever knows. But when new rivalries happen, I think it's because something specific happened, right?
Red Wings Avalanche.
Right, exactly.
But
There was an event that sort of like started it all. Like Michigan State, Wisconsin for a while was a football rivalry because those games were insane back and forth. Every Michigan State, Wisconsin basketball because of all the Bo Ryan coming here on the banner day and ruining it. Things like that.
I think there are caveats on them. For instance, to me, Michigan, Ohio State is a great rivalry in one sport.
Yes,
but
good point.
Nobody gets worked up in Columbus or Ann Arbor if the volleyball team in the Michigan-Ohio State match, but in the Michigan-Michigan State volleyball match, the crowds are into it. I mean, to me, the Michigan-Michigan State rivalry trumps Michigan-Ohio State in every sport. Football
Except
is a dynamic, is different, but Michigan wants no part of losing to Michigan State in football. You can slice that up anywhere you want.
So the Michigan-Michigan State rivalry, it matters in everything. And I think that is what we're talking about here.
I mean, Michigan put
geography.
A tremendous amount of emotional effort into beating Michigan State this year because they'd lost to them 2 years in a row.
Yeah, but it usually isn't like that. But I think what you're getting at here, you're right, I think. And the way I see it is when Michigan, think about it from a Michigan fan's perspective. When they lose to Ohio State in football, it sucks. I'm sure they don't like it. But the thing is, they can kind of commiserate with their own and escape it. When they lose to Michigan State, there is no escape. You share a state with those people. There's no division like you have with Ohio State.
You hear about it.
That makes it worse. That makes it more intense and more personal.
But I think the Michigan-Michigan State rivalry transcends football.
It does. I totally agree. It's in everything.
It's in everything.
Whereas Ohio State and Michigan play basketball, it's not a bit, unless they're highly ranked, it's not a big deal.
But they don't. But the fan bases don't nearly melt down in other sports the way they're going to melt down next Saturday.
So why do you think? Because you've been around the one. You tell me.
Michigan has more wins in college football than any other school in America, and Ohio State football has been a dominant power in America.
For a generation.
I mean, look, it's the face of the Big Ten. Let's be honest. It's the face of football in the Midwest. Michigan can have off years, but Ohio State is Ohio State. And
last year was an off year. One loss.
The documentary that's currently playing on Bally Sports Detroit, is it called The Rivalry? Yeah, The Rivalry. Have you seen it? It's been playing over and over. It's well done. It's well done. And it talks about the way the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry really didn't heat up until after the snow game in 1950 because that got the Ohio State coach fired. He lost. And that brought Woody Hayes into Columbus for 28 years. And he was insane over beating Michigan. And it has heated up. And then when Bo got involved, you can say what you want about those guys. Bo and Woody made that thing a lot of ways what it is today because they have won forever since then. And coaches get fired if they don't win the game.
Right.
See John Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, at Ohio State they do.
Well, at Ohio State they do. Earl Bruce, John Cooper. Who's
the last Michigan coach that got fired because they couldn't beat Ohio State?
Well,
it wasn't Lloyd Carr. That's not why he got
fired. In modern times, it's because they couldn't beat other teams either.
Right.
I mean, Rich and Brady, they couldn't beat anybody else.
That wasn't
either.
about Ohio State, right?
That wasn't about Ohio State.
But Ohio State has less tolerance for it than Michigan does, for sure.
I mean,
you know why? Standards hired Ohio State. Let's just call it what it is. It is.
But I don't think Ohio State has the world. Let's be honest about this and just tell it like it is. Who has the worldwide acclaim as an educational institution around the world? Ohio State or Michigan? Come on. Michigan is listed as one of the top public schools in the world.
I think it's third this year.
Fair or unfair. That's what its reputation is.
Sure.
Ohio State doesn't have that.
No, but what does it matter? For football.
I think for football, it doesn't.
I agree.
Yeah,
so why?
But Michigan is in a state that's dominated by the pros. Michigan State's here. It's a recreational state. There are a lot of diversions here, okay? I don't think people fall apart next Saturday if Michigan doesn't beat Ohio State. In Columbus, if Ohio State loses again, well, you've seen it with all these fans that come up here for the Michigan State game. It's their entire life is winning this football game.
Well, hold on. So wait, you're saying in Ohio that Ohio State is more essential to the sports culture than Michigan or Michigan State are to the state of Michigan?
I think the Michigan fan base certainly wants to beat Ohio State.
U of M, you mean? U of M fan base?
The U of M fan base. But I don't think life is going to conclude.
Like it would for Ohio State losing.
For some of those people in Columbus, it is their entire life.
I agree because in Michigan, there are still pro sports teams that collect a lot of clout. Even though they suck.
Teams aren't very good.
Ohio doesn't care as much about the Bengals and Browns as Michigan does about the Lions.
Yeah, there's no question. And I told Brock yesterday, I'm driving in to do the show. I'm listening to the Ann Arbor radio station, and John U. Bacon is being interviewed, and he's their longtime historian. Is
that what they call him now?
His opinion is that if Ohio State loses next Saturday and next year in Ann Arbor, to give them 3 straight losses to Michigan, Ryan Day will be replaced by Urban Meyer as a head coach. Now,
did he hear that on a sideline from an anonymous source that he ran as verbatim like it's the New York Times?
I'm just saying he was talking about...
That guy's a scumbag. Why are we talking about him?
He was talking about Ohio State.
I know. But why don't they let him worry about beating them 2 times in a row before we talk about them beating them 3? I think if they lose this year, he might get fired.
No, I don't think so.
Well, Urban Meyer is supposedly ready to go.
Be hired in 5 minutes.
Oh, so Ryan Day would get hired in 5 minutes.
Ryan Day would be hired in 5 minutes.
Yeah, but Ohio State could replace him with someone better in 5 minutes.
Who?
Like you just said.
Well, I mean, apparently Urban Meyer's sins would be forgiven in Columbus.
Yeah, I think so. Well, and it's not just an Ohio State thing. Someone is going to hire him again. He's not going to be in a TV studio the rest of his career.
But, you never talk about coaches' futures in regard the way you do in the Big Ten, like Ohio State versus Michigan. You just never do. That game, with the consequences for the loser, to me, is unlike any other showdown series of any other 2 in the Big Ten.
For sure.
And almost anywhere else. Anywhere else.
Is there another rivalry in college football where it can define a coach's legacy so much?
What's Auburn's record against Nick Saban? It can't be good.
No, but they've beat him more times than they probably Alabama likes,
but
right?
Look how many coaches they've gone through during Nick's tenure in Alabama.
But each one of them has upset him at least once, right?
Yeah.
Feels like.
I think
Gene Chizik did with Cam Newton.
Gus Malzahn with the kick six. They almost got him last year with this dude who's just got fired, right?
They should have won.
Yeah.
But Ohio State, Michigan is Middle America. It's Rust Belt America. It's my sister lives on the East Coast, and she grew up here. And like she said, the difference in my lifetime is when I was where you are, college sports were everything. Where I am, college sports aren't nearly what they are with the pros. They are nearly what they are, and she's right. The college sports are on the East Coast, up and down. But as she said, other than the Southeast and the Midwest, in the far west and here, it isn't nearly like the pros are.
Totally agree.
For whatever that's worth.
Yeah. Why is that, you think? Well, we can talk about it later, I guess. But those big cities, you're right. It's not like Chicago doesn't care about Northwestern.
Boston College, come
on. Or
Syracuse,
Rutgers, matter in New York City. No.
All they want to know is when are the Patriots kick off, or the Celtics, or the Bruins, or the Red Sox, or the Yankees, or
what
the
Mets. Yankees and Red Sox are going to do in free
That's why when my son, the two of mine that were in New York said Rutgers in New York City, when they say they added Rutgers for that market, he said nobody in New York City even heard of Rutgers, let alone in sports.
Well, that Michigan State, you mentioned kickoffs. This is a brutal segue, but I'm going to do it anyway. Michigan State kicks off against Indiana to close out the home slate here. In 2.5 hours, we'll take you up to 10:30 when network coverage starts. We're back here with the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show in just a few minutes.
Another travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Next, the Mel Tucker Show is back for another season on Lansing's Big Talker 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Get up close and personal with the head coach of Michigan State football every Thursday night. Be there in person or just call in and ask the questions you want answered. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. Brought to you by Ameriprise Financial, Dark Bank, Doubting Industries Incorporated, Schupan & Sons Incorporated, Blue Moon Belgian White. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
Traffic is starting to slow up. 496 eastbound between Waverly Road and Martin Luther King Boulevard, right by where the road closure still is in effect. 496 both directions between MLK and Cedar Street, although it is getting closer to being finished. Watch out for those trucks out there on the highways and the main roads. They are out salting them as we speak. So give yourself some extra room if you're around those trucks, and give yourself a little bit of extra time if you're heading into the ball game today. As far as weather goes, 21 degrees, fair skies, and sun is actually trying to peek through, but there is a winter weather advisory until tomorrow morning. Patchy blowing snow, winds 15 to 20 miles an hour, gusting as high as 35 miles an hour. Accumulation, an inch or two at the most, so it won't be much accumulation, but the blowing snow could be more of a factor. Your travel update is brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
This is the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
Welcome back into the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show here on 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ, coming to you live from the Price Right RV Studios. And we're also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Dart Bank Mortgage, Joe Sambear, Ameriprise Financial, Craig Stiles, DBI, We Do Office, High Caliber Karting and Entertainment, The Student Bookstore, The Nut House, and Gazelle Wealth Management. All right, now it's time to hand things over to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, for some defensive keys today, Michigan State and Indiana.
Today's defensive keys are brought to you by Gazelle Wealth Management. How do you figure out what Indiana offensively can do effectively, because Indiana's had so many problems keeping its quarterbacks healthy? As recently as 2 weeks ago at home against Penn State, Indiana was in the game, then the quarterbacks went down, and I'm using that term plural, because Indiana has struggled to keep its quarterbacks healthy. Now, it's a cold day, the wind's blowing. Indiana offense has been an issue the entire season in good weather. So on senior day for Michigan State, I would say the key for them is just play the game, play hard. You're not facing Ohio State. You're not facing Michigan. You get Penn State next week, that could be a different deal. But today, I don't think there are huge keys of this has to happen and this has to happen. Michigan State secondary had its moments good and bad against Rutgers, but then again, if that's going to be the case today against Indiana, can the Spartans avoid, I guess, giving up a big play, which Rutgers occasionally made last Saturday in a 6-point loss, although I don't think that score was exactly the way that game went. Michigan State had basically a 2-touchdown lead until the final seconds of the game. So I would say the defensive keys for Indiana are somewhat the same against Rutgers. Everybody figure out where you're supposed to be. Don't make any stupid plays. Don't take stupid penalties. Do what you can do because you're better than the guy across from you. And even if you give up a few points, the offense for the Spartans, I would think, would be good enough today. Defensive keys, whatever they have been brought to you by Gazelle Wealth Management this morning. Gazelle, for certain, takes a long-term view using prudent risk management. You can call Joe Gazelle at 336-7200 or visit Gazelle Wealth Management online, Gazall. Gazelle Wealth Management online at gazellewealth.com.
Thank you, Tim.
I didn't actually know it very much because this is Indiana.
Totally agree. There's no reason to.
Play
right?
the way you did against Rutgers, except for the stupid point spread cover pass at the end of the game.
4th and 31.
And everybody would have been happy. It was a mixed crowd after the Spartan win because in yesteryear, there was no such thing as legal gambling. And Michigan State's embraced it. It has its own gambling company that's in bed with, okay? So therefore, the point spreads, and by the way, I think it's 10.5. Is that what it is
it's
today?
Up to 10.5.
Which is somewhat like Rutgers. They're both, they're two peas in a pod in the Big Ten East. If you play Rutgers, you play Indiana. And in State's case, they got them back-to-back at the end of the year. And just think if the schedule would have been redone and Rutgers and Indiana would have come in after Western Michigan and Akron, and they'd have started 4-0, they'd have been ranked. And today's game might have been for a much bigger bowl opportunity, but the way the schedule played out, they got them at the back end after they had all those losses in the middle.
There are rumblings that Tom Allen may be in trouble at Indiana.
But he just got a long-term
2 years
extension.
ago. Yeah, 2 years ago he got a big extension.
This week, he secured an anonymous donation to Indiana Athletics that is mostly going toward football. It's a $1 million match. So an anonymous donor, if other people raise $1 million, he'll chip in that same amount. So they just got a $2 million. It's going toward football NIL.
But what they need players,
right? And he did a bit on his coach's show about this that I just saw blowing up on Twitter, and he was remarkably frank. He said, "Hey, I'm really grateful for this gift, and we really need it because guys aren't going to go where they're not going to get paid. But simply, we need a lot more."
Well, he fired one of his offensive assistants in the middle of the season. I want to tell you it was the offensive.
I wonder what that's like.
I want to tell you it was
Must be nice.
Yeah, he fired an offensive assistant coach. I don't think it was a coordinator, if I remember. But to their credit, he can't take injuries, say the way Ohio State and Michigan can.
Right, doesn't have the depth.
He doesn't have the next 5-star coming onto the field. I mean, their quarterback, if they would have, suppose they would have had Michael Penix, who transferred to Washington. If Penix was playing today, healthy.
Well, they wouldn't be 3-7, I'll tell you that.
The last time Penix was in here, he completed 21 consecutive passes. And, of course, Indiana lost at the buzzer. But
that was right before COVID-19, yeah.
In 2019, Penix for Indiana came in here, completed 21 straight passes, and Indiana lost at the buzzer. I mean, so some of these games that the two of them have played, I think this, last year I ran my mouth how they'd run Rutgers out. And that didn't happen. Last week.
Yeah.
Well, I could get away with that but for the last play, because it would have been a cover and it would have been 2 touchdowns.
Right.
But 27-21 sounds like a nail biter.
It does.
For the cover, it was.
If you didn't watch the game, it was.
But this is still. I think the weather's going to keep this thing closer than you think.
I agree. But also, let's just call a spade a spade. I know Michigan State has played better the last month, and they've won 3 out of 4 games, but they shouldn't be favored by double digits over anybody. They just should. They haven't been that good. And even though they've won 3 out of 4, they still haven't been that good.
Well,
by the way, Tim, the coach that got fired, an assistant coach, was the offensive line coach.
Yeah, that's what
Tom
I said.
Allen. You did?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I said if my memory serves me, he fired his offensive line coach.
Yeah, I've just heard rumblings that it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to be let go.
Was he blaming him for the injuries to all those quarterbacks? They
was
always
before
get
that.
their quarterbacks
That's
injured.
true. It does always happen.
They've lost 100 quarterbacks in 5 years.
Remember about 5, 6 before Penix? They were down to their fourth-string quarterback. They're playing the son of a soap
opera against Michigan State.
Xander Diamant. He was the fourth-string quarterback.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
he
was
actually
an actor from Hollywood.
A soap opera actor.
Yeah, he was a soap opera. And then what was the night game in Bloomington 7 or 8 years ago that went like double, triple overtime, and that clubfoot Indiana kicker just barely got it over the bar to win it. And State just gave, D'Antonio gets a lot of yak about the wins, but there have been some great losses, and that was one of them, too.
That was 2016, I think.
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
And that was the year they paraded the spittoon around.
Indiana did. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Well, if Indiana wins today, you're probably, as a bonus for those who've stayed, you get to see the spittoon. The spittoon will make an appearance on the field.
Speaking of the spittoon, Tim, before you leave today.
Yeah, I got to go in 20 minutes.
Okay.
Only because I've got other duties today, which I usually don't do.
Well, we knew this was coming, so I put the music in the system.
It's a great fight song.
You really think so?
I think it's a great fight song. I mean, they play. It sounds.
What makes a fight song great to you?
I don't know. I mean, it's like music for anyone.
Well,
everybody
hold on.
says they can't get tickets to Taylor Swift. I wouldn't go see Taylor Swift if they handed me box seats in the front. But everybody else in America.
You'd find someone who would go, though, Tim.
Well, listen, fellas. I am uniquely qualified to tell you what is and isn't a great college fight song, considering I am the foremost expert in this studio about college marching bands. And Indiana is not one of them.
Well,
During Victory March, I think, is the all-time greatest college fight
when
song.
When that fight song is played around the Assembly Hall at basketball, because I did 10 years of Big Ten basketball.
When they play the Iowa corn song in Iowa, the people go crazy. And yes, it's called the Iowa corn song.
Yeah. I mean,
everyone likes their own.
If you like your
stuff,
own, if
and
you
it's
like,
subjective.
There are a couple of high school fight songs in the area that are unique to that high school that have never changed. That I hear, that I know. I say, you know what? I'll tell you who else I think is a great fight song nobody knows about: is Central Michigan University.
Well, the break strain rips off Michigan State, so yeah, it is great.
I think CMU's fight song, both of them, are pretty good. I heard it the other night in the snow.
You didn't hear it as many times as you heard the Western fight song, though. Hey, do you know the break? Seriously, here's a band nugget for you, and I know you're a band guy. The break strain of CMU's fight song is lifted from Michigan State.
See, I don't know that.
All right, here's the break strain from Michigan State. You know it. Dun 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 dun. Central Michigan's break strain goes dun 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 dun. It's like
similar.
Vanilla Ice lifting from Queen.
That doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I don't care who stole whatever from who. In my world, it either sounds good or it doesn't.
Well, you know why? Because you're a novice when it comes to this. You're not an expert like me.
That's true.
You're the dean of sports, but I'm the bean of sports.
But that's the beautiful thing about music is everybody has their own opinion, what they like and don't like.
And it's subjective, yes.
It is. You know what? I'll tell you, here's a band perspective for you. Every year, people put out greatest college marching band rankings, and Kirk Herbstreit says, oh, well, obviously USC, Michigan, and Ohio State are the best three. Ohio State, clearly. Yes, of course. USC and Michigan do not belong on that list. They don't. First of all, USC's band is a gimmick. They wear sunglasses, and they use, like Michigan, they use music on the field, which is like the lowest of the low. You might as well be Iowa playing the Iowa corn song.
That's way over my head. Over my head.
I know. I'm basically talking like analytics in football. That's what I'm doing to you right now. But trust me, I'm right. Ask John Madden.
How many road trips does Indiana's band take?
I doubt any.
Unless it's Purdue.
Or they play IPFW.
I mean, when they played at Cincinnati, did Indiana's band...
Is it really?
When they played,
okay, IUPUI.
There you go.
When Indiana played at Cincinnati in September, did the band get on the bus and take the hour drive to Cincinnati?
I don't know. I doubt it.
I don't know. This requires, as you know, funds. That's what the band concert did. The band concert money went to send the band on the road.
Yeah. Well, you listen.
And last year it was Austria, or earlier this summer.
Which was cool.
Which was very cool.
The videos and images of the band going through that ancient cities in Vienna.
You can get that on YouTube. Go MSU Marching Band in Austria. And
you can also watch all these Viennese people what the hell is going on? They had no idea what was going on.
But the crowds were good for that, though. There were a lot of American tourists who knew that the band... They were part of a competition, too.
It was an
annual music festival where people would go.
I guess the biggest one in Europe or something. Anyway, I'm delaying real star of the program. So we're going to cue the music, Indiana. It's just the music.
Usually I don't get music.
Oh, well, listen, the Bean of Sports is here. The Dean of Sports.
I'd rather have a $5 bet that you can't do it. But you're not an Indiana fan.
I know you can, though.
All right.
You ready to hit it?
All right, here we go.
I don't have the shower.
On that note, my goodness. All right, here we go.
Indiana, our Indiana, Indiana, we're all for you. We will fight for the cream and crimson, for the glory of old IU. Never daunted, we will not falter, ever faithful, we're tried and true. Indiana, our Indiana, Indiana, we're all for you.
Again.
Indiana, our Indiana, Indiana, we're all for you. We will fight for the cream and crimson, for the glory of old IU. Never daunted, we will not falter, ever faithful, we're tried and true. Indiana, our Indiana, Indiana, we're all for you.
IU.
That was great. Now that's why you're the Dean of Sports.
Well,
and that's what brings the people
to
this
all
show.
Honesty, it sounds better when I'm in the shower. To be
Everyone
perfectly
does.
honest with you, it
That's
sounds
okay.
better in the shower. I think that's a great melody. I don't
It's
care
a
what
nice
you
song.
say. I think it's a great melody.
It's a nice
and that's
song.
not their only pep song. Bum, 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 bum,
Yeah.
bum, 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 bum. And Michigan State does not have two.
Now, do they? Now,
It has
Indiana
the
plays
alma
that
mater
one-
and a fight song.
Indiana plays that one during the world's greatest timeout during basketball.
They
games,
do it.
right?
Well, they play it a lot, just like Illinois. Illinois fight song. When I heard them down, dun 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 dun.
Oski Wow Wow. Yes.
They play that all. That's not really what their fight song is.
Right.
We're loyal to you.
It's a common
Illinois.
thing. Like
Yeah, it
Ohio
is.
State plays Buckeye Battle Cry all the time.
That's fantastic.
That's the drive on down the field.
That's right.
But that's not the fight song. The
No, it
fight song
isn't.
is across
but
the field.
they play Buckeye Battle Cry more than they do anything
'Cause it's
else.
better.
Because fight that team across the field. Ohio State is here. That's the old fight song. That isn't quite the because Purdue has two. Purdue has two terrific songs, in my opinion.
I like the main one. I like Purdue's main fight song.
I don't know Penn State and Nebraska nearly as well. I don't think Penn State's is that. And Rutgers and Maryland I never hear because they never score.
Penn State's, I've heard, it's called the Nittany Lion.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Oh, that's when they go roar, lions,
Well, no, they say
roar.
the Nittany Lion, molder of men. It's very dramatic.
And very sexist.
Purdue, I like Purdue's.
Purdue's is great.
The one that goes, hail, hail to old Purdue, hail to old Golden Black.
They still have the Golden Girl and the Silver Twins. They still have the world's
I thought they were
largest
all
drum.
dead.
No. The Golden Girl and the Silver Twins. That's
Yeah, Betty White just died. She was the last one.
Well, they make a big deal
Nothing.
out of their marching band.
Oh,
A
the
huge
stupid
deal out of
gimmicky
that.
drum, which, by the way, is no longer the largest bass drum in the world because Texas, with Bertha II, has supplanted
You know, a story about the Purdue drum. They were coming here a few years ago, and a year in advance, when Mark Hollis was the athletic director at Michigan State, he wanted to add a drum that was a foot bigger than Purdue's drum. And then he looked at the cost.
I'm surprised.
And
John
the
Madden
cost-
would have never gone for that. It's a gimmick.
It was, but he wanted to have Michigan State say it had the biggest drum and looked into it, but the cost got prohibitive, and that got sent to the sidelines, and the next issue came up. So Michigan State does well. What is Michigan State's identity in the band? Because the Purdue drum is the identity, and the Golden Girl and the Silver Twins.
If you have to distill it down to one thing, I would say it's the series, which is the march to the stadium with all the chanting and all
And
that.
it takes forever because they got 500 kids in a
Yeah,
band.
but no one
Doubles their
does
attendance.
as intense of
Yeah.
a thing as they do on the way to the stadium. Okay, I know you have to leave, but I put something together special for you, Tim, because your favorite team, TCU, went into Austin and won last week, despite you giving me the lock of the century that Texas would roll
I'm
under the
watching
lights.
the game that night, and I told Brock on Monday, I said, Texas, what happened to the guys that played last weekend against Alabama? Where is that quarterback? Where was this guy? And they're in Austin. The
Right, under the
stadium
lights.
is absolutely like the Breslin Center with Michigan in
Yep.
town, and they can't get out of their own way.
I tried to tell you that Quinn Ewers is still not right,
Well,
and
now-
TCU is legit.
And my 10-point game in the pool this week is I have TCU minus 2.5 at Baylor, and they better not let me down.
Well, last week your 10-point game was Texas against TCU, wasn't it?
I found religion.
So, you're going to find a little bit more because I put something together special for you. Brock, can you hit that on the hot page? Number 4, TCU, undefeated. getting 7.5 at number 18, Texas. Tim's all about the Longhorns.
No respect for the Horned Frogs.
None. Zero. They've got more AP top 25 wins than anyone else. The Rodney Dangerfield of college football this year.
Well, that's the story of my life. No respect. No respect.
They're going into Austin, and Texas has as good a quarterback, I think, as there is in the country.
My detector test determined that was a lie.
Texas Christian always gets behind.
No.
They always start slow.
Wrong.
And then they have a big comeback. But I call me crazy. I don't want to explain it. I'll take Texas.
I'm taking TCU. 7.5 is a big number for a good team.
I don't think TCU is an undefeated team in America, but we'll see.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Why not?
It's TCU.
They've got 4 top 25 wins. No one else has even 3.
That is correct.
Well, it's my stereotype prejudice. Just think primetime in Austin's dangerous.
I think this is dangerous. Horned Frogs, 7-1-1 against the number this season.
I told you so.
That was just for you, Tim, to send you out today.
Well, I've got them beating Baylor. All right. I've got
minus 2.5.
I've got them going undefeated and playing Georgia.
I took Baylor with the 2.5. I just feel like it's a natural letdown game for TCU. And something you said about them that I do believe is true, aside from you're hating on them because they're not a brand, I hate that. I don't like that argument. But something you did say that's accurate, they've been playing with fire. And generally, when you do that, you eventually get burned. See Michigan State football 2015 in Nebraska, right?
See, despite you critics, Michigan State's longtime former great band director John Madden texted me from Georgia this morning, exceptionally good singing, bravo, tour de force. I didn't think it was that
He's
good.
being nice. He's being polite.
He knows I have no fans. However, I was a huge fan of, I'll tell you, for the 28 years he was here, man, he led that thing. The State's band got a lot of national acclaim with him leading the way. And look at what they went through between 9/11 and all the other things that went on, and he had the band in the front. I miss him. There were a lot of things we
Me
did.
too.
He got him up to Charlevoix, the economy in Charlevoix for 3 years. He took the band up there. Has never been the same since we haven't been back up there.
And the whole doing a joint performance with other bands is kind of his brainchild after 9/11 with Notre Dame. So he's an innovator.
And he's got great stories. The stories are good, too.
All right.
But he knows good music because I said I didn't think it was that good a performance. But you know what? When you get to be a genius as a singer, like I have become,
yes,
then
with no vocal training, shocking.
Your critique on your own vocal cords, starts to become.
Speaking of great performances,
like Fraser Crane, I'm cutting him some slack. He's had no formal training.
I'm amazed I can still remember the words. To be honest with you, because there's not much you can remember the older you get.
Well, a hell of a performance by you. And we'll go to break with that because it's going to be hard to top. White Law PLLC Tailgate Show back after these words.
Back with more of the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show on 1240 WJIM and 94.9 MMQ in less than 60 seconds.
Bluebird.
The Michigan State Spartan hockey team is back for another season on 1240 WJIM. Never miss a game again, whether you're on the go or just like doing it the old-fashioned way and sitting around the radio. Every face-off and every playoff can be heard on Lansing's exclusive home for Michigan State Spartan hockey. 1240 WJIM, Lansing's only home for hockey. Avoid the interruptions from the games and listen longer in the free 1240 WJIM app. Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM Lansing, and Classic Rock 94.9 WMMQ East Lansing, Town Square Media Stations. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
Traffic looking free and clear out there on the highways and the main roads right now. Nothing major right now. A little bit slow right around I-69 between DeWitt and the North 69 interchange, and there's still trucks out there salting the highways and the main roads. So be careful around those as you're driving around today. Why? Well, there's a winter weather advisory here in the mid-Michigan area until tomorrow morning. Blowing snow, 1 to 2 inches of accumulation, but mainly blowing snow is the deal. 15 to 20 miles an hour, gusting as high as 35 miles an hour, a high temperature in the mid-20s. Right now, 21 degrees in the Lansing area. Your travel update brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
This is the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Today's broadcast is brought to you by White Law PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
Welcome back into the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show, live here on 1240 WJIM, Lansing's Big Talker, and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Coming to you from the Price Right RV Studio, and also brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White, Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac, MSU Healthcare Sports Medicine, Doubting Industries, Schupan & Sons Recycling Industrial Services, Gravity Smokehouse, and MSU FCU. And now it's time for Mad Dog's Take on the Game with David Mad Dog DeMarco, brought to you, as always, by Blue Moon Belgian White. One of a kind every time. Blue Moon is a proud partner of Michigan State Athletics. Dave, how you doing?
Doing good, Brandon. How are you fellas doing?
We're all right. Getting chilly up here, though. It finally turned into winter, and chilly out on the field last week for Michigan State. That's where I wanted to start with you. I was at the game, and I was just shocked by the amount of fans who have turned on Payton Thorne and are calling for Michigan State's quarterback to be supplanted.
I've heard the same thing in recent weeks. I'm not sure why.
Me neither, because I get it. He hasn't been as good as last year, but has anyone else noticed he doesn't have an all-pro NFL running back in the backfield to divert attention? Dave, your take on that?
Well, I thought that he really would make strides. I didn't know if he'd make strides like Matty Sissoko has in 1 year, but I knew that I thought that he would be better. But you make a enormous. When you take a half of the pie, you got a half of the pie left. Well, the half of the pie is with the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, I mean, I broke these numbers down, and I'll read them on my offensive keys. I mean, Michigan State as a whole, offensively, have smelled. That's the bottom line. He is the field general, and he has a few times this year thrown behind receivers, threw the ball into the ground. Not the case of like Lombardi used to when he played for Michigan State, but he's thrown over guys. But then again, Reed was out a couple games. That was his go-to guy. Coleman became his go-to guy. And they have had resemblance of a running game with Berger. I thought Broussard would be better. I thought Collins would play more. The offensive line has been hurt, and they don't utilize. Last week they did the tight end a little bit more. So that's the way sports is. I mean, it just is. I mean, they put another guy in, Kim or whoever, and he struggles. They'll want to put Thorne back.
Exactly.
That's just the way it is in sports. You guys, that's what you guys do. You talk it, you live it, you eat it, you digest it, and that's the way fans are.
Yeah.
And, I mean, regardless, if they get a win today, bad, good, or ugly, I mean, they're bowl eligible. And I don't know if they can go to Happy Valley next week and get a win there, but I do think it's inevitable they will win today. They're a 10-and-a-hook home favorite against just a god-awful Indiana team. They should just bury. And I just can't see them losing this game. I mean, it's senior day. I think that, it's cold there. I've been following the weather there. I'm not going to be one of those guys that moves to another state and says, well, today it's going to be 55 and pure sunny in Cedar Bluff, Alabama, which it's going to be. But, yeah, it's been unusually cold and damp. And, I mean, hell, I looked at the weather 2 hours ago, and it was, with the wind chill, it was 1 degree. So I think it'll be interesting to see the turnout. Now, did I understand Dean left the studio?
Yes.
Well, he's listening. I know he is. When you guys were talking about that before he left, about the TCU thing, I sat and listened to this last week, and I'm like, I don't know where he's coming on. And I know you're listening, Dean. I don't know where you come up. Do you watch these games? TCU is a really, really good team. And after I got off with you guys, I had to do some landscaping. That's my new game now. And I was listening, and I'm like, this is going to come back to kick him in the rear because TCU is going to go into Austin. I mean, Sarkisian is a good coach. I mean, who's kidding who? He's good. And Ewers did look good against Alabama before he got hurt, but he's struggled since then, since that injury. Getting back to, the Big Ten, I don't know. I think really what everybody's waiting for now is Michigan going into the Big House and seeing if they can cut the cake and, get to the Final Four again. I don't know. I can't see it. I think that Ohio State's still a dominant team. And but getting back to Mel Tucker's team, this is interesting how this is going to be. I didn't think they'd be bowl eligible, and today they can be. I mean, 6 wins after what they had last year, people are definitely not real hip, like you said, to how the season's gone. But, if they go to a bowl, I don't know what bowl they're talking about going to. I mean, would it be, I don't know, Brandon, what have they said, what bowl possibilities
obviously
for Michigan State?
Quick Lane or Music City Bowl, which would be in Nashville. But think about that. That's a good point. Let's get to that. So they have a chance here. They win today and somehow win in Penn State next week and then win their bowl game. This season goes from looking like it was on an inevitable death spiral to like 3-9 to all of a sudden they could finish winning 6 of 7 and get to 8-5, and that totally changes the taste that's left in your mouth for the whole offseason going into 2023.
No, it is. I don't know what kind of style points that gets. I know that when I was on 2 weeks ago and I said that beyond comprehension with the tunnel gate thing, I know that I had the ire and I was under like bamboo shoots underneath Andrew Aboud's fingers because he was texting me and he said, this team's going to go 7-5, dog. And I'm like, okay, I'm not saying he's wrong. I mean, but there's going to be, for them to win today, I think they got to give a very good effort. I think Indiana's down. I think they stink. And I think Michigan State should stomp a mud hole in them. Next week, a little bit different. You got to go on the road. You got to play hard against Franklin's team, and it's not easy winning in Happy Valley. But I think that one thing we talked about last week, and I really read a lot about, the guys that are suspended right now, we understand whether they were baited into what happened in that tunnel. That's not for me to argue. Everybody saw it a million times. But the guys that were sitting now have an open opportunity to play and show their wares. And guys, get up. I mean, I remember Henry Bullitt telling me a long time ago, the late Dr. Defense, when I used to have Henry in the studio and I'd tell him, how did you get guys motivated? He said, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're getting dressed for the game and you're running out on that tunnel, I can't get you more. You got to get yourself motivated. You can't just be the coach. You can't be the coaches. You got to get a mindset that you got to go out and you got to execute. And that's one thing Nick Saban always stresses. He always says, but he really stresses, you got to do your job. You got one specific job. You got to take care of business. Don't worry about the other guys. Take care of your stuff. And that's what these guys obviously did. I mean, they've been on a little bit of a win. Now, they haven't played super teams, but regardless, that's on their schedule, and a win is a win. I mean, if they win today, they win. They go to a bowl, and they go to Nashville. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, there's so many bowl games. I mean, it is what it is. And Tucker can salvage this. But, I mean, they lost recruits through that tunnel gate thing, and I don't know who he's going to bring in. I know that the way I understand, Thorne will be there one more year, and he should be better. But he has had lapses, and I don't know if it's because of NIL. I don't know if it's because of ego. It can't be because of practice. And he has been, I think, a little bit dinged up, too. I mean, Their offensive line has been spotty. And, like I said, I can't see them losing. The last 2 games that you guys asked me predictions, I've been off 1 point on predicting how many points Michigan State would score, both of them. And Dean, you can mark that up in your car. And it's funny because I was listening to you, and I'm like, God, he's picked up where I left off. I mean, I used to be, the Dean Gasser, and now you've just stepped in that role. But again, when you make these comments that, these teams aren't good, or hell, they're really. I mean, TCU is a very good team,
but they're not a brand. I don't see them as a brand.
If he wasn't even their original choice. They wanted Urban Meyer real bad, and Urban Meyer wanted to go to the Jaguars.
Yeah,
Sarkisian was at 2 to 3 years. He was the old coordinator at Tuscaloosa.
Texas.
He came there with baggage, with a personal problem he took care of. He's a good football mind, but I mean that's a tough place. I mean they won a lot. Starting Darryl Royal and then going to the next coach and Vince Young days and everything else. So they want that stuff coming back. For TCU to go in there and hornswoggle them, that was a big deal. As far as Michigan goes, I mean, I can't see them losing to Illinois. I can't. That number's big. As far as covering, that's another story. But I like Michigan State to cover today, 10.5 points. I really do.
So why don't you tell us your prediction there and give us your offensive keys for today?
All right, so I'm going to say at the end, I'll just start with the offensive keys brought to you by our friend Jamie White and the people at White Law. These are your O keys for today's contest. Between the MSU Spartans and the Indiana Hoosiers, your O keys are brought to you by our friends at White Law PLC. They are a full-service law firm located in Okemos, Michigan, serving clients across the state of Michigan, open 24 hours, 517 area code, 316-1195. It'll be a frigid day in Spartan Stadium. With a win, they will be bowl eligible. MSU is a 10.5 point home favorite. Payton Thorne is the cat driving this locomotive today, and he has to stay very sharp. Thorne, and these numbers I want people to listen to. Thorne has a 63.2 completion rate, 16 TDs, 9 picks. With a running game, Berger has 6 TDs. The stuff that I want you to listen to is coming up. With the receivers, Coleman also has 6 TDs, but Mosley and Reed will be involved if MSU is to take the Hoosiers out. MSU is 167th in scoring, 199th in yards per game, 121st yards passing per game, 241, 241st rushing yards per game, 142nd on third down efficiency. So that's not real electric offense this season. But with a win today, like we just said, they will be bowl eligible. The over and under is 47.5. I don't know if they're going to get that, the over. Mel Tucker and his team have had a wild season. It's been just a roller coaster. They could right the ship with a big dub today, although just being bowl eligible, it's steps backwards, this situation we just talked about. But a win does get them to a bowl. The offense must play aggressive and no moronic penalties. I like MSU 28-17 today.
All right, you got them covering that 10.5 then. And that's Mad Dog's Take on the Game, brought to you by Blue
Wait a
Moon.
minute, I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
I got to ask you something. All right, so yesterday, like I told you, I've been in the landscape in our house here and doing stuff. So I had you on your program, and I've known you now 10 years, okay? I don't know if it's a wear-off of being around me. Man, you came out of the gate of your program, and, man, you were like spitting napalm about the situation with Michigan. And I don't know if it was Dickinson that was on Barstool Sports.
Yes.
I didn't even hear that until you told me that.
It was.
And Portnoy hates Michigan State because he's a Michigan grad from the East Coast. I mean, he'll do everything he can do. And, man, I'm going to say this. If you come out with pitchforks like that, that's a good thing.
Well,
I don't know how it reacted and people did because I had to do other stuff. But I commend you for doing that because what was said was a lot of factual things that you said, and it's always been like that. I mean, I know when Todd from Lake Orion used to bring it, he always used to say, why does the Detroit media, give Michigan a pass? Well, a lot of the Detroit media, we all know those guys. I mean, you got to ask Solari that or Charbonneau that. Those guys work there. I mean, that's exactly the truth. Jim Harbaugh, didn't he break his hand? I sent you guys that. Slapping Jim Kelly or hitting Jim Kelly in the NFL and that stuff that happened last year with Juwan Howard. I mean, and people are acting like that was no big deal. I'm like, What do you mean it wasn't a big deal? It was a very big deal. A lot of other coaches would have been fired for that, but that was just my, I guess, hitch onto how you started out.
Well, I appreciate you I appreciate you saying that. Thank you, Dave. Personally, I appreciate that. That's very nice. Of you.
Bring the napalm once in a while. You're just putting stuff out there that people want to hear and want to say, and it isn't a Michigan State thing. I mean, that's just the way that went down. I know that when I was there for so long and the Nassar thing came, there were a lot of Michigan fans that said a lot of derogatory stuff about Michigan State and Nassar. Then the Anderson thing comes, and you don't hardly hear anything about that. And Jamie White was an attorney, and you know that from knowing Jamie, in both those sides. So, I mean, you got to play it fair on both sides, just the way it is. He goes on there and predicts on Barstool Sports and predicts Michigan's going to win, and they had their ass handed to them by Bobby Hurley. Bobby Hurley had to be
who does that? How many programs can you think of where their team leader is going on podcasts and predicting a 20-point win? I can't think of that happening anywhere else.
I don't know if Tom Izzo does this anymore, but I know one thing. He despises social media, and I know one thing. 2 to 5 years ago, he told all his players, nobody, and I mean nobody, gets on social media during basketball season. And if you let your player go on a sports radio program, which is fine because, we have them. I did for a long time. There was in the beginning, they didn't want guys to come on or girls to come on. But when you're predicting yourself, you're putting yourself in Joe Willie Namath's shoes and predicting a win, and that happens. That's just pure stupidity.
I know. It's weird.
It just is. And, I'm sure Juwan Howard spoke to him a little bit, but, I mean, here's a guy coming from the Fab Five and what those guys did at midcourt at Michigan State when they were seniors.
Right, and that was the point of what I said yesterday. Like, if the Detroit media is so interested in covering a story like Woodward and Bernstein would about a college sports program with cultural issues, maybe do a little bit of digging on Michigan basketball because there's some smoke there.
I mean, the thing is, we go back to all that stuff, the rivalry and everybody else. I mean, you got to have your facts when you're talking on the radio. There's no getting around it. You can't just give your opinion. If you're going to give an opinion, you got to have it based, and you got to have a foundation with some solid facts. So when you bring the facts, that's like a lot of we grew up. A lot of people can't handle the truth. And if it's one, you got to be fair with both sides here. And I didn't even know he did that. I mean, I've been so busy up here doing other things and saying, I didn't even know he was on the Barstool Sports show doing that. But Portnoy is an anti-Michigan State guy, and this is the way it is. So, all right, you guys have a great weekend, and stay warm up in mid-Michigan.
We will. Thanks, Dave. Good to hear from you. Mad Dog's Take on the Game brought to you by Blue Moon Belgian White. And we're back for our last segment of the White Law PLLC Tailgate Show.
Predictions coming up next.
After these words.
Another travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Next, the Mel Tucker Show is back for another season on Lansing's Big Talker 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Get up close and personal with the head coach of Michigan State football every Thursday night. Be there in person or just call in and ask the questions you want answered. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. Brought to you by Ameriprise Financial, Dark Bank, Doubting Industries Incorporated, Schupan & Sons Incorporated, Blue Moon Belgian White. The Mel Tucker Show on 1240 WJIM. It's time for another game day travel update from the 1240 WJIM Traffic Center. Driven by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen difference.
Your last travel update. No major backups or accidents or anything like that out there. Things moving pretty clear. Although 496 eastbound's a little slower than normal between Waverly Road and Martin Luther King Boulevard where that road closure is. There's still trucks out there salting the highways and the main roads, so motorists be careful around them. Right now, 21 degrees, fair sky. Sun is trying to peek through, but there's a winter weather advisory until tomorrow morning. Mainly, it's blowing snow, an inch or two of accumulation, so not very much. High temperature, about 25 degrees, but 15 to 20 miles an hour, gusting to 35 miles an hour. That'll be the deal. It's 22 degrees right now. Your travel update brought to you by Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac. Relax and enjoy the Shaheen different.
This is the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show on Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM and Classic Rock 94.9 MMQ. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Whitelaw PLLC, Shaheen Chevrolet, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White. Now, let's talk to the Dean of Sports, Tim Staudt, and offensive-minded host, Beanie Howell from the Price Right Auto and RV Studios.
All right, we're back wrapping it up. Just a couple of minutes left here on the Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show. So let's talk about the line here. Michigan State now laying 10.5 against a 3-7 Indiana team who is officially eliminated from any postseason competition. You tell me, Brock, here's how I feel. Obviously, Indiana's bad. So I understand why people think
3-7, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And who knows who's playing at quarterback? So many injuries.
Maybe Xander Diamond.
And their offensive line has been really bad. So I get why people are expecting Michigan State to, lay to the hammer today. Here's the thing, though.
I'm not convinced of that, but go on.
I cannot validate making Michigan State a double-digit favorite over anyone. And I know they've played well the last 4 weeks. They've won 3 out of 4. It's just really hard for me to lay those kind of points for Michigan State. So I expect them to win relatively comfortably toward the end, but I would say I'm going to say the same score I said last week, 24-17.
24-17. I don't think it's going to be that high scoring. I think the win's going to be a factor. If it's as bad as they say it's going to be, gusting to 35, it won't be as bad as it was at Illinois. That was just horrible.
Yeah.
But I think it could be a factor. I think the cold could be a problem, and I just see a lower scoring game. Michigan State 14-6.
Okay, I could buy that too.
Just a gut feeling.
So we both have Indiana covering. That's the big thing.
Yeah. I think that's big there. Quickly, thoughts on the college football playoff? No changes really in the top 6.
Yeah, I think it's the same as we were last week. What do you think about TCU laying 2.5 at Baylor?
Wouldn't shock me if Baylor won that game.
Yeah, I took Baylor. I just feel like TCU's going to have a real hard time replicating the same get-up they had last week under the lights at Austin for a huge game. This game's at noon. Baylor's not very good, and yet Baylor has everything in the world to play for.
Trap game, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, TCU loses one game, it's over for them in the terms of the playoffs. So
whether it's fair or not is a separate question.
Right.
But, all right, 1 minute to go. You got sponsors.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show. And thanks to all our sponsors. Obviously, Whitelaw PLLC, Price Right Auto and RV, Blue Moon Belgian White, Shaheen Chevrolet and Cadillac, MSU Healthcare Sports Medicine, Doubting Industries, Shupan & Sons Recycling Industrial Services, Gravity Smokehouse, MSU Federal Credit Union, Dart Bank Mortgage Joe Sambear, Ameriprise Financial Craig Stiles, DBI We Do Office, High Caliber Karting and Entertainment, The Student Bookstore, The Nut House of Downtown Lansing, and Gazelle Wealth Management. Thanks for being here, folks. The Whitelaw PLLC Tailgate Show is back live from the Price Right RV Studios 1 week from today, Saturday, November 26th, as MSU closes out the regular season at Penn State. Game time not yet announced, but whatever it may be, and we're expecting it to be 3:30 or 4, we'll be on the air 3.5 hours before kickoff till 90 minutes before. Until then, go green.
It's Lansing's Big Talker, 1240 WJIM Lansing, and Classic Rock 94.9 WMMQ East Lansing, Town Square Media Stations.